Okay, well, welcome everyone to the third speaker series hosted by the Center. I'm Carolyn Merrick. I'm a co-chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee here at the Center, and I'm also your Zoom host for this evening. So a little bit of housekeeping prior to this wonderful talk we're about to hear from Susan Bro. Everyone is muted, and that's because we have a wonderful turnout and we want to make sure we hear Susan's presentation. If you ever have any questions or comments, you can put them in the chat. And Enid Krieger, who I'll introduce in a moment, will read those questions and comments to Susan when Susan has finished her presentation. We have a brief survey at the end, and I thank you in advance for sticking around and filling that out. It really helps us. As well, if you want to email me with any written feedback, I'm the one who sent you the invitation, so you can just hit reply and send me your thoughts that way as well. Let's see, you must register for each event separately. So if you registered for this one and you'd like to attend other ones, you need to go back to our website, that first page on the bottom right, and you can click on register here and go through each of the talks and register for the ones that you would like to attend. We've done something unprecedented. We've gotten over 300 participants for this. So we, we can only hold 300 participants. So it's kind of a first come, first serve at this point, but I'm pretty sure you can get in. Let's see what else. Okay, that's it for the housekeeping. It's my great pleasure to introduce Enid Krieger to you. And Enid is a center member, as well as a member of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And without Enid, we would not be here tonight. Enid has developed each of our 3 speaker series, the concepts discussed, and the speakers chosen. So we owe a debt of gratitude to Enid. What one person can do is amazing. And thank you, Enid. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. And welcome to all of you. I am just overwhelmed by the number of people that I'm looking at on this screen. This is fabulous. So it means we're on the right track and we're doing the right thing. It's so wonderful to see all of you. You know, ordinarily, you would be welcomed and provided with information about the center from Peter Thompson, who's the executive director. But in his absence, I just want to tell you a little bit about the organization so you'll know why we're doing this and why we're all here. The Center at Belvedere, which is formerly known as the Senior Center, is a place where wellness and healthy aging takes place for everyone from 50 years of age and older. People who come here are connected socially. They're offered all kinds of volunteer opportunities, not only at the center, but at other organizations in the community. And they're also challenged to grow intellectually, physically, spiritually, and creatively. And it's just a great place to gather and to just be. It's a wonderful place. Some of you may have heard the presentations made in our prior 2 speaker series. Those presentations were part of a response to an organizational self-assessment of the center completed nearly 3 years ago, which revealed a serious lack of diversity in the staff, the volunteers, and the membership that had previously gone unnoticed, virtually unrecognized. Following that assessment, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee was kind of resurrected to identify the barriers that prevented access to opportunities offered here, or that were causing people of color to feel excluded. The speaker series was among several steps taken to address that issue. Then the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and too many others opened our eyes to the realization that we were part of a greater community with a very long, complex, and problematic history with race. And we began to figure out ways that we could be part of the solution. This led to the idea of coordinating with other agencies outside of our system, all the other agencies' efforts to dismantle the systemic racism in our area. And so the Racial Equity Task Force was established to work in parallel with our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. The task force has almost finished its work. It's developing recommendations for the implementation of a long-term structure and process that's designed to keep equity, diversity, and inclusion integral to all aspects of the Center at Belvedere. So having said all of that, in our previous series, the spotlight was on race and racism and about what's been and is being done to Black people in our community and all around the nation. Those of you with us today who are not residents of Charlottesville may not know that today is Freedom and Liberation Day in Charlottesville. Today, on March 3rd, 1865, Union troops arrived in Charlottesville and Albemarle County, and 14,000 enslaved people were freed from right here, where we live and work, in Charlottesville and Albemarle County. This is just a part of the complex history that exists here. But we won't be focusing directly on Black people this month. Instead, this series will focus on white people. Some of the titles of the presentations are deliberately provocative. I take full responsibility for that. We want to open your mind. We want to jolt your spirit. And we invite you to think about things that you normally would not have to think about as a white person. Things that Black people have to consider on a daily basis, like having to research whether there's racism in a particular country you may want to travel to, or being afraid to call the police for a dangerous situation because you don't know how that's going to turn out, or being asked to change your hairstyle in order to fit in at your job or your school. We hope that you will consider those sensitive issues. These presentations are not intended to make you feel guilty or defensive. This is simply education. We know that having privilege does not necessarily mean that white people are immune to life's hardships. It just means that white people have received benefits and advantages in our society that people of color have not, simply because they're white. Our goal is that by the end of the series, perhaps we'll understand ourselves and each other a little better. Maybe we'll respect each other a little more, so that together, during next month's wrap-up, we might consider the ways in which we can work collectively to address the issues of race and privilege that exist right here in our community. So to kick us off with the definition of white privilege, it is my privilege to introduce Susan Bro. I met Susan during the 2018 pilgrimage to the Equal Justice Center in Birmingham, Alabama, and I was so impressed by her strength and her determination. Most people know Susan's story about the loss of her daughter, Heather Heyer, in 2017. Following Heather's death, she founded the Heather Heyer Foundation in order to carry on her daughter's legacy. And she's become a fearless and outspoken leader in the fight for social justice and civil rights, not only here in our community, but all around the country. Susan holds a Bachelor of Science degree in elementary education from Southeastern College of the Assemblies of God in Lakeland, Florida. And she taught in the Greene County Public School system for 15 years. But currently, she's a full-time advocate for social change. Zoom won't allow it, but let's give her a silently resounding welcome. Susan, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. Wow, what a hype. Okay. Well, we're going to talk a little bit today about who I am, where I'm from, what I've learned over the last almost 10 years in learning about myself and learning about those around me. And we're going to talk sometimes when something is so prevalent around you, it's hard to see. And so some of the time we're going to be looking at ourselves, and some of the time we are going to be looking at how issues in our society have affected other people as a way to contrast and compare with what happens for us. Am I on screen, Enid? I see you.
You are.
Okay.
Thanks. You're welcome.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, here we go. So just in case they didn't have enough commercial, I gave a commercial here in the beginning, just to say, be sure to sign up for the whole series. Dr. Jelaine Schmitz next week. And you can see the whole list. I can't see the list entirely for my own screen, but that's okay. You've got the idea, and I will have the website posted at the end of the series as well, just to remind you. I do want to encourage you to sign up for all of them. However, though, even though our topics are not the same, we will overlap at times. We will say some of the same things at times, and that's okay because the message is all of one series. Think of this like not taking only part of a pack of medication that your doctor gives you, but you need the whole pack. You will do better when you take the whole series together than you will if you just take one part of the series. So I strongly encourage each of you to sign up for all of it. So today we're going to talk about white privilege. I want to give you a quick note that it's okay to be a little bit uncomfortable as we go through this. Remember, I'm white too, and I'm talking to us, and everyone's welcome to learn in this situation. Just keep in mind when you're learning something, it can be uncomfortable. And some of you, this is old hat. Some of you, this is brand new. I have a feeling not many of you, it's brand new, but that's okay. I do FaceTime teaching assistance with my granddaughter. She's 6. And the first time she encountered number lines, she had an utter meltdown. She cried, she sobbed, she threw a tantrum. She vowed she would never get it. The next time they were introduced, she cried, she sobbed, but a little bit less. About the 3rd time or 4th time she got number lines, it suddenly clicked for her. So if you feel uncomfortable, I hope I don't make you cry and sob and throw a tantrum. But if you have to, that's okay. Just stay with us. We'll get through it, and trust yourself to grow in the process. And that's all I have to say about that. Now, I wanted to start out by showing you this lovely building. You can tell it's an older building. It's been added to a number of different additions here, there, and yonder. And this to me reflects our society. American society can be viewed as an older house. In her book, Cast, Elizabeth Wilkerson talks about how an old house will often be painted up and plastered up and look very beautiful, but there will be structural considerations in it. So what we want to think of is our country is kind of like this old house. We didn't build it. We have inherited it. There's a lot of hodgepodge add-ons. There's a lot of stylistic things that we might not have chosen for ourselves, but it's our house now. We have inherited it now, and we have a responsibility to fix it. So part of her using the analogy of a house is she talks about how the American social structure is like a caste in India, and that caste is the bones of our society. So I want us to think about that as we go through. In her book, she talks a lot about the society in India and how one of the things that people do in India when they get to know someone is immediately find out what someone's caste is, because they know where to structurally place them. So let me tell you who I am. Let me identify myself in the caste. As Enid pointed out, I was a school teacher for a while, but what she didn't also mention was I was a single mom for most of that time. I worked 2 and 3 jobs. I'm from a long line of school teachers, engineers, coal miners, farmers. At one point, my family were sharecroppers, generations back. And so I don't come from a high level in the caste. But my understanding of privilege up to that point, or up to about 2013, was that privilege was something that was given to a few, but not to many. And I didn't have it. And I did not benefit from privilege in society, that I worked for everything I got, and that my family worked for everything they got. And that was my understanding of privilege. What changed was actually my daughter changing. And as my daughter changed in her understanding, she had long recognized that there were inequities in society, but I don't think she had a full understanding of white privilege, and I don't think she had a full understanding of racial inequity. She just had a strong sense of justice. But she began to see the difference, and she began to try to explain it to me. And we had a great many arguments about it. I will be honest. I was a hard sell, because my understanding was that you worked your way up in life and you pulled yourself up by the bootstraps, and everything was on you, that you weren't given anything in life unless you were rich. And we were definitely not rich. So it was a challenge for me at first to get it. Part of what changed for us in the house was Heather was in love with a Black guy, and he lived with us briefly. And I began to notice that as we walked through the store, people would follow us. As we sat in restaurants, people would not give us service. Now, I had believed for a long time that once Obama was elected president, and once we had gotten through the civil rights era in the 60s, that we were in a post-racial society, that it was all taken care of. Had I stopped to take my head out of the sand, I probably would have known sooner, but it was convenient for me to not notice. Because when you live in privilege at whatever level, that is the air that you breathe, that is the water that you swim in, that is your environment. American society has been set up so that it is normal, quote unquote, when things are white. And so if you are white, you just think that everybody else has it the way you do, and you don't really pay attention unless you're snapped out of it. What I'm asking you today is to take off your goggles, take off your white privilege glasses, and look through a new lens as I go through some of the differences and some of the ideas that people who are not white face, and let's think about how they compare with our own lives. I saw this quote from Gloria Steinem. I saw it so many places I couldn't really cite it, and I did add in the maybe, but I thought it might apply here before we dive in. The truth will set you free, whether it upsets you or not, but it will eventually set you free. In Democracy in Black, Eddie Gauld Jr. talks a great deal about value gap. And I thought about that. As a former teacher, I don't normally mark in books. I know a lot of people highlight books and write in books, but my copy of his book, I have so many stars and underlines and circled areas, it's not even funny. And the book is actually from a previous time in our history. In a way, it's during the Obama administration. So obviously the world's changed a great deal since then. And yet, as I thought about what he had to say, the value gap still remains. So as we set up our country, we didn't start slavery, but we certainly accepted slavery as a tenet of our population, as a tenet of our economy. It was part of the structure, part of the cast in building our house and building our government and building our democracy. And so in that way, white privilege was established from the beginning to be a gap between how one group of people was treated and another group of people was treated. And I did Africa here because of slavery, but if you think about it, this happened even before slavery. And I just lost my earpiece, hold on. Because it also applies to Native Americans. What right did white people have to come in and take over the land? And yet, by justifying that they considered people to be less than human, they would commit genocide, they would take land, they would take people from their homeland, they would strip them of their culture. And so in that way, that from the beginning was established in our country and in our government. This mule here represents economics in our country as part of our history. Now, Dr. Schmidt next week is going to talk more about the history of racial categories in our country, but I want to point out that, remember I said my family were sharecroppers. At one point in time after the Civil War, during the brief Reconstruction period, Black people were promised 40 acres and a mule. And for a brief time, some of them were able to have that. But with the coming in of the new president, that was yanked away, and they were not able to work anywhere except for the same plantation people that they had worked for before. So in that way, that value gap that was put in there from the beginning was maintained. There was a brief moment during Reconstruction when people were allowed to join the ranks of other people, and then they were promptly pushed back down. Nevertheless, as you see from the very rudimentary graph at the bottom, it's just meant to be symbolic. For a while, Black businesses thrived. They built Black Wall Street. They built value into their existence. White people, seeing that gap closing, immediately ran over and tried to shut that off. Now, some of you would say, well, what has that got to do with white privilege? The white privilege comes in that no matter how low on the totem pole white people got, they always considered themselves above the Black people. That's when you have your Jim Crow laws coming. That's when you have the times of lynchings, when it looks as if they're going to rise to the same level. It was made a part of the caste system that this was based on either perceived color or color, where you don't have to ask someone a question of, well, who are your ancestors? Where are your people from? And the way they do in India, but you can tell at a glance whether someone belongs to that white group or not, theoretically. Doesn't always work that way, but that was the theory. And that was used to, again, control the lower white level, as well as to keep Blacks down below. And you'll see some of that even in modern society, as we're going to see here. So fast forward to the 60s. I'm forgetting to turn the page as I go through my notes because I have 3 or 4 pages of notes I wanted to make sure to cover. As we get into the 60s and we get to the building of personal wealth, of course, people of color and lower whites were both kept in low earning jobs, both kept at lower socioeconomic levels, but white people were promised a privilege of they could build themselves up, pull themselves up by the bootstrap, if only they tried hard enough. And they were given advantages even in the 30s. Social Security, when it first came out, and I'm old enough to apply next year, I get to go for Medicare this year. It did not include domestic workers or farm laborers, most of whom at that time, or many of whom, were Black, as well as what would be called low-class whites. And so even though people think Social Security was for everyone, it wasn't originally. There was the Wagner Act that was also originally to prevent labor abuses, and that was also not allowed to apply to domestic workers or farm laborers, many of whom were Black. Then fast forward to the Federal Housing Authority, the FHA, and FHA we think of as a policy that provided for everyone, so that everyone could get better help with mortgages, everyone could live in better neighborhoods, but it was deliberately blocking Black people. In fact, it specifically stated that Black people could not access some of those same mortgages in the neighborhoods that they lived in, that if they were there, other people could not get them either. That policy we've heard of as redlining. Now, you're in my kitchen. I was a single mother. I was on and off living with my parents. I'd been through a divorce. And during that time period, I actually went on welfare and went on food stamps. We often think, especially since the days of Reagan, that people on welfare and receiving social services are minority or disadvantaged groups. Disadvantaged by poverty, yes. Perhaps disadvantaged by education, which I was not. I had an education, I just couldn't get a job. And in fact, statistics show that it's largely white people who are on receiving social services, particularly on food stamps. Now, the piggy bank there and the house are not only symbolic of the savings that you try to save or the money to buy your own house, but it's also symbolic of generational wealth. Because people of color were not able to get their loans for housing, but white people were, white people began to have the generational wealth. When I moved into this trailer, I didn't have enough money for the down payment, but my parents did. They had the generational wealth and they gave me the money for the down payment. I've lived in this trailer since 1995. I've gutted it with my current husband's help and my last husband, I'll say. He's smiling at me across the table. We have rebuilt most of it at one time or another because it's not usually by now a trailer's falling apart, but we're in pretty good shape, knock on wood. And I was able to do that because my parents had generational wealth. My parents paid for my first round through college. Now, when I graduated from college with a teaching certificate in Florida, they were laying off teachers in 1979. So I got married instead and had the 2 kids. And then we split for the third and final time when Heather was only 5 months old. So I still faced hardships, a lot of them from my own doing, but I had that generational wealth from my family to bolster me when I hit really hard times. I went to UVA to grad school on student loans, doing work study, but my parents were able to help with childcare. And I was able to get a job as a teacher eventually. But even as a teacher, I continued to work 2 and 3 jobs. There are other people who are also continuing to work 2 or 3 jobs, but they don't have that bolster of the generational wealth to help them out. So the redlining and the policies of the past are still impacting the present. People are struggling to make ends meet on both sides of that privilege line, but some have that extra cushion and some don't. Now here we're going to talk about education. And this is kind of a tricky subject. We know for a fact by statistics that, well, we know for a fact, first off, that school funding is based on real estate taxes. So if you live in that nice neighborhood with that nicer home that you owned and bought with your generational wealth or pulled up by your bootstraps, whichever, you're going to be able to send your kids to the better school, or at least the more funded school. There's no guarantees it's a better school, but it's more funded school. In fact, I want to get this statistic right. Schools with with the highest population of Black and brown children receive $1,800 less per student per year. $1,800 less in funding. Now that can be all kinds of funding. And that doesn't even account for the fact of parents being able to afford to take their kids to museums or concerts or films or other advantages that a parent may be able to offer their child based on their income, based on their earning value. You also have the problems of, well, I'll get to equity in policing in a minute. But I do want to throw in this thought that the first time many children are arrested is by a school resource officer for disorderly conduct. And that tends to be Black and brown and disabled children. And that starts the school to prison pipeline. Now, I don't want to leave you with a bad note here, although if you were to think of this as a competition, then maybe you'd be threatened, and that's your problem if you're threatened by other people succeeding. At this point in time, Black women are the most highly educated demographic in the United States. I have 3 friends who are Black with PhDs. I don't know, I have a few friends who are white with PhDs, but I have more white friends than Black friends just because I happen to know them, have known them for longer, I guess. But yeah, so there's positives coming out of that. However, people will tell you that a Black child or a Black person in a job will have to work twice as hard to get half as much recognition. We do see Black excellence in schools. We see white excellence in schools. But again, that generational wealth has tended to affect the money spent in the education system, as well as the quality of education that is available to a Black child. There's where white privilege has given us an advantage again, with the intersection of the housing and the income earning ability. And here's a touchy one. White privilege is a value gap here as well. When I married my first husband, I had no experience with anybody with drug use. He told me that his drug problems were related to marijuana. And at that time, I began to hate marijuana. We broke up 3 times in the course of an 8-year marriage. And as I said before, the third and final time we broke up was when Heather was only 5 months old. He was addicted to crack, but at that time, crack was viewed as a Black problem. And you heard a lot of talk in the news about crack was evil, people who did crack were evil, that we should just lock them all up and throw away the key, that it was a huge crime problem, and that Black people were bringing it, Black people were blamed for a lot of it. And I know for a fact, a lot of white people used crack, and I really didn't hear much about it. Move on down the line to now, and you have an opioid crisis. And part of this opioid crisis involves a great many white people. And suddenly it's, oh, we need mental health services for addiction. These are not thugs. These are just misunderstood people. These people need help. We need to do all that we can to make life better, and so forth and so on. It's a matter of perception. It's a matter of, I wish I could say it was strictly because we learned from our mistakes in the past and we're doing better. But from what I hear people saying, it sounds to me more like an issue with people are allowing people who look like themselves the benefit of a doubt, and they're not allowing that same benefit of a doubt for people of color. And that is white privilege. I know that many of you have surely by now seen at least one, if not many, videos of people pulled over in their cars who are not treated well, to say the least. It can turn deadly from the simple act of reaching for their driver's license, reaching for their car insurance card. My son was a horrible driver. He totaled a car every year for the first 5 years he drove. He started driving at 18. My daughter was a horrible driver. She totaled a car about every year and a half for the first several years she drove. At no point in time was a gun pulled on either one of them. At no point in time were they afraid for their lives from the police. At no point in time did I have to go bail them out of jail. They were given tickets. The car was towed. They came safely home to my arms. At no point in time did I have to have the talk with them that life is dangerous and authority can be scary and authority can be frightening. That's white privilege. I have many friends with Black children who have to have the talk with their children at a very young age, as young as 2, 3, 5. I shared on Twitter this week a meme that someone else had posted, and that is, if a child is old enough to receive racial discrimination, then they're old enough to learn about it from their parents. I don't have to worry when my son goes to his job. I don't have to worry when my grandkids, ages 4 to 14, go to the playground and play with toy guns or with being in the wrong neighborhood at the wrong time. I don't have to worry about those things because my skin is white and my grandkids' skins are white. They're protected automatically. They're given the benefit of a doubt. I mentioned school resource officers early. So often, according to statistics, the children who are arrested in school, it's for disorderly conduct. I can guarantee you that my daughter was guilty of disorderly conduct in school. She got put in the principal's office a number of times, but never had to deal with a school resource officer. She was never arrested. As you think about your, looking over the audience, I'd say most of us have grandchildren at the least. So several of us have children, not everyone. But think about moving through your day, moving through the store. You're not followed on a regular basis. Recently, my best friend and I were buying office supplies for the Heather Heyer Foundation, and we were in the local Walmart. And we noticed that the two ladies in front of us, who looked to be probably Hispanic, were both stopped, and the guy asked to look at their receipt and look in their bag. I looked at Kathy, I said, well, that's new. Never seen that before. So we pulled out our receipt and handed it to the guy, and he said, oh no, you're good, and passed us on. And it wasn't until we got back to the car in the midst of our chattering, conversation, that it even hit us that we had just witnessed an act of discrimination right in front of us. And with our white blinders on, we hadn't really paid attention. We hadn't noticed. I don't know if I should have gone, I guess looking at it now, that was a few years back, I would probably go to management and say, is this really necessary? Either search everyone's receipt or search no one's, or unless you have probable cause. But white people so often are given the benefit of a doubt, and they don't even have to explain themselves. Poor people of all races often have to deal with the cash bail system too, which is also used as a form of discrimination against Blacks and whites. But it tends to be less of an issue with white people. Another thing that we get for benefit of a doubt is trial by press. I've made friends with many reporters over the last 3 years, well, almost 4 years now. But sometimes I even get after them because if they're talking about an alleged attack of people, if the attacker is believed to be Black, then suddenly you're hearing about the thug. They go looking to see if the person has any sort of purported record, to see whether, were they from a single parent or whatever. But if the person is white, well, maybe they're misunderstood. Life has been rough at home. They've got issues. We need to take care of them. We need to evaluate them. And the coddling that happens in the press so often is a problem. One interesting statistic I came across in CAST reading was that Black on white crime happens way less than white on Black crime or Black on Black crime, but more often what's reported in the press is when there's a Black on white crime. As I often tell my reporter friends, it's not always you, sometimes it's the editor. Nevertheless, when you, as a white person, look at things in the paper or on the news, look at them with a sense of questioning what you're seeing. Look at them with a sense of thinking about them, whether or not you think they're real. And I'm losing track of time here. I better speed up, hadn't I? White privilege is a value gap in medicine. The United States has one of the highest infant mortality rates in the world. We are one of the most advanced countries. We like to think of ourselves as the most advanced country, and I have always thought that myself. But especially Black infant mortality rates, the rate in 2018, which was the most recent statistic I could find, was 10.8 per 1,000 live births. There was a death rate among Blacks of 10.8 infants dying per 1,000. Among whites, it was 4.5 infants per 1,000. That's more than twice as high. That's not okay. We can do better, and we need to do better. According to the AMA, there were 74,000, well, over 74,000 actually, needless deaths, excess deaths, they call them, on average each year among Black people compared to white people for 2016, 2017, and 2018. That's before COVID. That's before we even consider the statistics for COVID. 74,000 plus excess deaths on average. If that's not a gap, I don't know what is. There are so many misperceptions among the medical community regarding Black people. There are some who believe Black people have thicker skin. This is old eugenics teaching that is still a part of what we are teaching in medical school, still a part of the commonly accepted kind of knowledge. It's believed that they have a higher pain threshold. And so many times they are denied medicine. Many times their complaints are ignored. They're accused of being drug seeking. They are accused of just trying to get attention. I have fibromyalgia. I have diabetes. I have arthritis. I have neuropathy. When I go talk to my doctor, she takes me seriously. I don't ask for a lot of drugs. I don't use a lot of drugs. In fact, I don't use as many as they want me to, but they're offered to me without hassle. That is not the case for so many people. You don't realize how much your white privilege is there because you don't see it in contrast to what's happening to other people. Now I see that it's getting late, so I'm gonna speed up a little bit. I will tell you the AMA is working on diversity and inclusion, but if you look at their website, and I have it cited in my acknowledgements, they're very tender and gentle about how they step around the issues. And I'm sure it's for liability purposes. They don't want to be accused of liability or, you know, face lawsuits or whatever. But I keep thinking, how many people are going to needlessly die? How many people are going to be in those excess deaths before things like this are fixed? Now, I'm going to wrap up here. White privilege doesn't mean your life hasn't been hard. It just means the color of your skin isn't one of the things that makes it harder. And that was spoken by Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy Kimmel, a late night talk show host, came to this realization, and I did cite the article in the acknowledgements. I think more and more of us are coming to an awakening. I tell people I wish that it didn't require human sacrifice to make that happen. But I'm not special. Mothers lose their kids all the time, all the time. And they don't get attention. They have to go on the public and clean up their child's reputation or protect their child's reputation. Heather was murdered in August of 2017. Dawn and Richard Collins, their son, Lieutenant Richard Collins, was murdered in May of 2017. They cannot refer to him anyway except as Lieutenant Richard Collins in public in order to gain him the respect that he deserves. I received justice for Heather in, I think, the end of 2018. They did not receive justice for their son until this year, 2021. White privilege brought attention my way and gave me a platform. Dawn and Richard Collins have been able to get justice and work on hate crime legislation for their son, but there are so many who don't. When you look at the world around you, especially over the course of this series, take off your goggles, take off your swimming glasses, look beneath the surface, look underneath the structure at what's going on in the house. Look to see if you can see ways that your white privilege has given you an advantage and puts other people at a disadvantage. Compare and contrast. Think about what you hear. Think about what you say. And I'm gonna go to the acknowledgements here, which will be available, I believe, with the recording on the website. Here's a list of recommended readings, and these are really only dipping a toe in the water. Some of these may be recommended by other readers as you go through in the following month and the rest of the series. And I wanted to leave you with this. Okay, ladies, got questions for me?
Don't see any questions yet.
What?
But I'll tell you one thing. No. What's the question? That was such a powerful presentation, Susan.
Well, thank you.
And it doesn't leave much, to me, it didn't leave much space for questions. It's something that we all need to absorb and think about and try to do better. We need to do better. Let's see if I have any hands raised from somebody. Okay, let's see. Somebody has to ask. Susan will be disappointed if somebody doesn't ask something. So come on, guys.
Joy has a question, Enid. Joyce has her hand raised.
Joy, oh, Joy. Okay. Can you unmute yourself and you can ask the question?
I need Joy, I'll unmute you. Just hold 1 second.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
let her speak her question.
Yeah.
Can you get her?
I'm
unmuted?
working on it. It's there you go. Joy, can you unmute yourself now?
Oh,
yeah, up here.
There she is.
Yeah, Susan, when Heather was, and I'm glad you're using the verb killed. When Heather was killed, what was your final motivation to get yourself involved?
I'm glad you asked that because the first thing I heard was, oh, she's Antifa. Now, at that time, my understanding of Antifa was people who went around and broke windows, because I had, in fact, been sharing a number of memes about people who showed up at peaceful protests and smashed windows and kicked over mailboxes, and they were the people in black. And Heather happened to be wearing black that day. So my first thought when the press showed up at my house was, and they showed up at 7 the next morning. I had sobbed all night long quietly beside my husband. But I said, okay, I will take this on. It's part of being from the Appalachian mountain culture, but it's also part of my bulldoggedness. I'm just going to plunge in and do it. So my first aim was to just tell the truth. Make sure the truth was told about Heather, who she was, what she represented, that she was peaceful, that she was headed to her second job. That's why she was wearing black and so forth. And then I thought the funeral would be the last time I would speak. I ended up speaking at the VMA Awards, but again, that was just a brief thing. Won't be speaking again. And so gradually people would ask me to come tell Heather's story. And at first, as anyone who's lost a loved one would do, I was glad to talk about my child. But honestly, the Black community in Charlottesville was wise to point out that it was putting a white face on August 12th. And that was not my intention at all. That was not my thought whatsoever. I was just talking about my kid. And so I began to focus on the Black issues. And that has gradually grown. I will tell you, I lost more sleep over putting this presentation together because I wanted to get it right. I have a stack like this on my kitchen table of that book, those books that I listed. Yeah, they're right there. So yes, it's grown out of a gradual desire to meet a need as I have been requested to meet the need. But Enid, you put a fear in me.
I have that effect on people. So we have a statement and a question. Elizabeth Sherrod says she's a teacher and she's witnessed firsthand how Black children are being left behind. And she wants to know, how do I go to bat for my kids and convince administration that my kids deserve the best too? I belong to Rise Book Club, anti-racism book club based out of Waynesboro, but they actually have people across the country. And so one of the books that we read, oh shoot, let me make sure I get this right. It's I will have to send the center that information because I can't remember the name of the book now. It's in my room, but I don't want to run and get it because we'll run out of time. But it talks about the inequities in the school system. I was thinking it was Bell Hooks, but that's ain't a woman. Shoot, hold on. Well, okay, go to another question and I will find that real quick. Okay, so you look that up and Renee Galloway has her hand raised.
Yes, I see.
Renee, we can unmute you so that you can ask your question. So is there one book from the list you shared that resonates with you most and would you recommend it as a first read?
Well,
When did you forget?
Caste in a way does, but it also covers the broad spectrum so much that you might want to wait till the end of the series and read it as sort of a refresher. For me, Democracy in Black, like I said, that just explained that value gap so much. Stamped, I'm looking at the list stack here. Stamped is very good for when you're getting through the history lesson. If you wanted to read that before you read Jelane's, and it's actually a very easy read. They've simplified the story quite a bit. If you find that, my husband brought me a stack of books. Hold on. He knows me. No, don't go get more. I've got too many books now.
Well, I take these back and go get other ones.
The main thing I would say, though, is books by Black authors. I realize that White Fragility is on that list, but really books from Black authors are going to tell it like it is and not dance around the issue so much. That makes sense. Oh.
Enid, Renee is now
Renee, are you
unmuted.
there? Is she unmuted now?
Yeah.
Hello. Can you
Hi.
hear me?
Yes,
We
ma'am.
can.
Yes, thank you so much for this presentation. One question I have for the presenter, considering that white privilege is akin to structural racism in this country,
Yes,
how do
ma'am.
you perceive from a white perspective how you go about dismantling the structural racism so that we can actually get to address the issues of white privilege?
Right. So I specifically didn't mention Dr. Kendi's book about anti-racism, and it could go on the list only because I was focused on white privilege and I wasn't sure that that was my purview to put that one on there. That book, he talks, especially in the last chapter, about the systems of racism, that educating like we're doing now is only a first step. And once you get those goggles off and start seeing it, then you start actively looking for ways to make that difference. For example, right now in the Virginia State Legislature, they are talking about the legalization of marijuana. There are some plans that provide equity. Here comes my husband with another stack of books. There are some plans that provide equity for those people who have been incarcerated for this very thing that other people are about to get rich off of, and does not deal with them. There are others who do not address that at all. And so once you take those blinders off, then you can start to see. Honey, just give it up. I don't know. I'll have to let y'all know about what that education book is. But you've got to get involved at the local and the state level in order to make a difference. Something as simple as telling the truth in history class for school children. Right now, history is so watered down. It's so, well, history books, so often when I left, now I quit teaching 10 years ago because I had a round with cancer, and I quit in 2009, December 18th was my last day because I had surgery in January. History books still basically talked about the lost cause like it was a fact. So we've got to do some truth telling. We've got to do some fact, I still keep looking for that book, some fact finding and some fact telling to ourselves and to others, but then we've got to move to a place of action. If we just keep sitting here learning, our heads are going to explode and nothing changes. And that's what so often happens, especially with white people. We get involved, we get excited, and then we go, oh, never mind, I can't do anything about it. One of my favorite quotes is, if you think you're too small to do something, you've never been in bed with a mosquito. And I would say a flea, a bed bug, any of those little things. It makes a difference.
A dust mite.
Yeah. We have to become active at whatever level we can.
Right. And, you know, I can add to that. There's someone, who is it? Miss Dosu Tabzira is talking about that very thing. She said her concern, and I keep losing it, her concern is around the sustainability of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because in the opening presentation, as I said, it was mentioned, you know, that they revived diversity, equity, and inclusion. They revived this committee. Mm-hmm. And she's concerned that it always becomes a hot topic and then it falls off the radar. My problem with that is that everything that happens bad becomes a hot topic and then some other topic takes over. You know, George Floyd was killed in front of all of us. And we don't hear too much about George Floyd right now, but there are other things that have taken over that the news, you know, as you talked about, the reporters have taken over. I think that first of all, our final presentation will talk about leveraging white privilege, as someone else asked. But I think that what we're doing right now, if everybody would just keep it going, just talk to a friend, talk at church, talk wherever you are, wherever that conversation comes up, talk about it so that we don't lose it. This is a very, very important topic. And if we don't handle it, we will just end up going backwards. So I agree with you that we have to have a sustainable approach. And one way is to just keep talking about it. Keep it in the news and in the limelight.
And make a commitment. I'm going to do this. I'm going to speak up. I'm going to be that squeaky wheel, because Charlene's going to talk, like you said, about how we can use our white privilege. But I'm saying even this week, make a point to take in the news with a different mindset. Make a point to look at the people around you with a mindset. You don't need to be afraid every time a teenager who's Black walks by. Are you afraid of every time a white teenager walks by? Are you afraid when a Black man walks past your car? Do you lock all the car doors? But do you do that when a white man goes by too? Maybe you are a fearful person, but maybe you're racist. Think about it. Just look at what's happening around you, honestly, without those goggles on.
Hi, Enid. This is Allison.
Hi, Allison.
May I ask Susan a question?
Absolutely.
Hi, Susan.
Hi.
This is Allison Linney. I'm your speaker in about 3 weeks, I think. And Susan and I.
Oh, you're breaking up.
I said, Susan, you and I try to hold each other accountable for this work, I think.
Yes.
We try to ask each other to do better. And I was wondering if you could talk about how you handled moments when your Black friends or colleagues have pointed out your misstep, your racist behavior, and what you do in those moments. Because I know one of the things you value is this idea that you haven't reached some pinnacle of perfection.
No.
You continually mess up. Losing Heather doesn't mean that you won't still be racist and do racist things. And I think it might be helpful if you could talk about what you do in those moments when you realize, even with your best of intentions, you've done something you're ashamed of, and how you've handled those moments.
Thank you for bringing that up. Absolutely. First thing is, don't talk back. Don't defend yourself. Don't cry. Don't say, oh, I didn't know. Oh, I'm. It's not about you. Shut up. Sit still and just let it simmer. And it generally takes me probably 3 or 4 days to figure out, oh, got it. I mean, I'm not a quick study on this stuff. I'm getting quicker the more I do it, but I'm not a quick study on this stuff. And when somebody, like I said, when people said I was putting a white face on Charlottesville, the whole event of August 2017, I was like, oh my God, yes, I am. Well, now what do I do? And so you have to learn how to apologize. You have to learn how to say, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I won't do it again. And don't qualify it, center yourself, dissolve into tears. I mean, yeah.
Great,
yes, ma'am.
Janice Taylor has your hand up.
Okay, yeah, on a couple of measures. I'm from New York, Long Island, so I'm very much aware of redlining and Hicksville with GI Bills of Rights, where Black people could not buy homes, nor could homes be sold to them. So, but on another issue, I'm just thinking it's learning to talk to other people in a way. Well, for instance, with friends, we had a heated discussion, and one woman started yelling at me that she's not a racist. And I didn't know how to answer that because everything I presented to her made her look like a racist, even though I wasn't accusing her. So I think a big part of this is also learning to have a conversation, because people are coming from many different perspectives. And what I'm learning is that I've been blindsided, even though I've been involved with many different groups with racial, religious equity, et cetera. I was really blindsided. And I'm 78 years old. So I'm just learning now even more about, again, white privilege.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
And it is a journey. And I was stung in reading for this, I believe it was in Democracy in Black, where it pointed out that Dr. King even mentioned that many white people would rather be seen as reaching down and helping Black people from time to time, rather than actually fixing the problems that put them in a position to need help. Yeah. They would rather run the food banks than try to fix, which that still needs to be done, don't get me wrong, rather than try to fix the situation that caused the need for the food banks in the first place.
It's charity versus justice.
Yes, and you need both. You need a mixture. Thank you.
Any other questions?
There's one here, Enid. Do you want me to read it out?
Would you please?
Sure. It says, Ms. Burrow, how has recognizing the reality of white privilege impacted how you live your life on a daily basis? Thanks, James and Carolyn Barkley.
Okay.
I try to be more mindful. I try to be especially mindful to think before I speak. I used to do a lot more of the centering myself when I would talk to people. I would try to relate, try to say, oh, I understand. No, I don't understand. Even though I lost a child, I don't understand what a Black mother goes through. And I have loved ones, small Black children, and my heart catches when I look at them and I think, are you going to be okay? At what age are they going to be afraid for you? And yet my fear is nothing compared to the fear that their mothers go through. I'm looking from an outside. I'm protected, privileged. I can't even begin to put myself in the place of someone who has a lived experience. Number one thing is listen to people with their lived experience. Do your own research. Don't lean on other people to tell you. Don't go asking your Black friends, what's it like? What's it like? What happened? Go find out for yourself. Then you can come back with an intelligent conversation. I'm sorry, but I've told this to people before, highly educated people who still run to their Black friends. Well, tell me about, no, go do your own research. Yeah, sorry.
That's
I get
good.
excited about that one.
Excuse me, this is Sarah Kelly. I'm on iPhone. I appreciate you saying that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miss Kelly. And I'm grateful to the Black men and women who have, offered to teach by all means. But I do pay them from time to time. I believe in paying reparations, and I don't take it for granted. It's emotional toil.
Right. Avis Allen has recommended, Susan, you were in an excellent documentary that she's encouraging everyone to see, called Breaking Hate.
Thank you.
So that's
and there's another one that just was released called The Reunited States, and it includes me and as well as 4 other stories of people who are just starting to learn about white privilege, among other things, but mostly it's a story about people trying to reach across all sorts of divides, and that's available. Again, if I ever find that book, it's bugging me now, I will send that, and I can send a link to the center to share as well.
That would be great, because the center is working on their library. We have so many new books in the library by Black authors.
Awesome.
So if you all need to just come to when we open again, we're not open yet, but when we're open again, I encourage everyone to come and take a look at those books. Many of them that's been mentioned are now on the shelf in the center library. We have another.
Oh, sorry, Enid. I was just going to say there's some people that have unmuted, so they might want to ask too. I don't know.
Okay.
Unmuted. I'd like to say something, if I may.
Okay. That's Dolores Roca. Sure.
Yes. I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that people need to be educated to the fact that they think that the Black people were freed as slaves, when actually that did not happen. Society came back and still enslaved them through misconception, through devious actions, and that grew as our society grew, and it became an acceptable thing. And I think that it's something that people need to be educated to from the very beginning, that the Civil War did not free the slaves. It did not.
Very good point. And I hope Dr. Jelaine Schmidt talks about some of that next week. I've heard her speak on that subject before. Do you know if she is, Enid?
I believe that's part of her presentation.
Good. Stamped talks about some of that, and also The New Jim Crow, another book that I didn't get on my list, but that I'm in the process of reading now, is another book to carry that thought forward.
Susan, Liz Hacking would like to know, what was your first recognition of your white privilege? How old were you when you realized?
Oh, so we were poor whites living in Roanoke when I was a child, up to the age of 5. And wealthy Black families began to move in because they had been displaced by gentrification downtown. Now, I didn't know why they had moved in until this past year. I talked to my father about it, and he was explaining it to me a little better. The wealthy Black families were being displaced downtown, so they were displacing the poor whites. And we were the last white family to leave, and the little boy next door and I would argue back and forth and play back and forth through the fence. We were not allowed in each other's yards, and I don't remember my mother saying it couldn't happen, but I just know we never crossed that fence for some reason. And I remember when we moved to a white neighborhood, then to a new house that was built in Salem, I never saw another Black person again until I was in middle school. So I think my parents did not teach me to hate by race, but I think society in general taught me to separate, recognize differences. I remember my dad always tell me, you can't date a Black guy, because if you do and you fall in love and get married, people will be awful to your children. And that was all he ever really said about it. But yeah, I knew there were differences. I didn't understand why, but I knew there were differences in how people were treated.
Okay, let's see. What do we have here? Edie Reed. Well, she's written this to everyone. It's easy to be angry with folks I disagree with politically and racially. It just dawned on me how completely insensitive I am to their closed-minded views. That seems very problematic to healing. Do you have any comments about that, Susan?
Actually, the reunited states has a number of resources on their website. It's the reunitedstates.tv. And they have a lot of resources on that website. I don't know if the center has access to some of that too.
Yes, Debzira just shared that information to download the free ebook of the Reunited States of America. So you're on the same page. Yeah. Awesome. And in terms of that recommended book list and all of this information, we can do that afterwards, right, Carolyn?
Sure.
We can send that information out to everybody.
Like I said, that is not a comprehensive list. That's just what I use specifically for this presentation.
Yeah, yeah. We have lots of comprehensive lists around that I'd be happy to share with everybody. Let's see, anything else?
Is Sylvia or France Payne, or are you all interested in sharing? You're both unmuted. Sylvia or France Payne?
Yes, this is Sylvia. I just finished reading the Vanishing Half, and it's a remarkably stark picture of white privilege, because it takes two sisters, one who could pass for white and the other that cannot. It looks at their lives over a period of years. It's very compelling.
The Vanishing Half?
Yeah. The Vanishing Half.
Okay, thank you. I'm writing that down.
I'm sorry. It also points out something that's almost never talked about, and that's what we have done to the image, the self-image of Blacks in our world, because within the Black, shows the discrimination within the Black community, where the lighter colored Blacks are preferred. And it breaks my heart when I see that, I hear it, or think about it.
When I taught in Buckingham, I saw that with the darker skinned children were getting picked on by the lighter skinned children, and it broke my heart because I knew that was our fault.
Yes, we did that. It goes back to the famous the dolls, the white doll, black doll experiment. Which one would you choose?
Yep.
I have to go back and look at that. I haven't seen that in a while.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Millie Fife is sharing that our local public libraries can be great resources for some of these discussions. I would also like to put a plug in for the African American Authors Book Club. I know that some of them are listening, and they'll be very happy to know that I'm saying this. But we have a book club in Charlottesville that's been in existence since 1996. And we read only books by African American authors or African authors. And we meet once a month. We will be meeting at the Senior Center as soon as we're able to. Time to be determined. But if anybody wants more information about that, I'd be happy to share.
Sarah, are you meeting online?
We're meeting online right now. We meet once a month on the second Monday of each month at 7 o'clock. We meet from 7 to about 8:30, 9 o'clock the latest. And we have fabulous discussions about the books that we read.
And what's your current book? Or what's the next book?
Oh, let's see. Now you're going to tack my, when you ask me, right? Come on, Susan. You know when you ask right away that question.
Put it on the site. We'll get to it later.
I know there's somebody from the African American Book Club on here. Somebody say something. Oh, Yellow Wife. Thank you, Elaine. We're reading The Yellow Wife. And actually, The Yellow Wife is going to be, that's our book for the Festival of the Book. We host an author every year at the Festival of the Book. This year, we're hosting online. And it'll be The Yellow Wife on the 24th. It's actually a day that we're having this presentation, but if we finish a little bit earlier, we can get over to the other one by 7 o'clock. And
on the 24th?
That's gonna be a wonderful discussion. Beverly Adams, Dr. Beverly Adams will be the moderator, and we will be talking about The Yellow Wife. And you'll like that book because you'll relate to it because it's about Richmond.
Oh.
Thank you for reminding me, Elaine. Let's see, from Avis, yes, I'll send you all. Who was that asked that question? The note went away. Where'd it go? Send us all the resources, including the book club that appear in the chat and those mentioned in live discussion. I'll be happy to do that. First of all, I need to officially say thank you to Susan Bro for an inspiring, outstanding, thought-provoking, fabulous presentation.
Well, thank you. It was my honor to be here.
Thank you very much. You know, I have a reputation. My reputation is that nobody says no to Enid.
That's right. I never have yet.
You, Susan. Thanks, Susan, for keeping my reputation intact, and all the other speakers who'll be joining us over the next 4 weeks. And then our moderator, Bob Garrity, who can never say no to me. This will be a wonderful month that we're going to spend together. And I hope that you will share it with other people. We can hold up to 300, but you know, as many as we can get on. I hope that you will discuss the topics with your friends. You know, I'll just tell you very quickly that Kaki Dimmock and I, one of the other speakers, we were interviewed on WINA. And one of the questions that we were asked was, talking to the choir, you know, we're preaching to the choir when we talk about this topic with this population. And the answer is, we really don't know, and we can't control that. But what I would hope is that if we are preaching to the choir, that the choir will then go and find somebody who doesn't attend services and share the information. I think that we need to get as many people involved in anti-racism as possible. And I appreciate all of you for being here and joining us. Thank you very much. And thank you again, Susan.